Welcome to Fitness Casual, fitness and nutrition tips for busy people. I'm your host, Andrew Hayes, along with the amazing Kat Best.
Hello.
Kat, we usually do a hot start. Today we're doing women's hormone health. You have been on quite the journey, I think, like most women. Why don't you just start there and tell us some of what you've been through?
Sure. Well, I think female hormones, very complicated topic. And I think one thing everyone has to keep in mind is that women, every week of the month, you are in a different hormonal state. And you're honestly not really taught that. We're all aware of what periods are and what menstruation is, but I think all the hormonal fluctuations that happen, in between, ovulation, your luteal phase, your follicular phase, all of that stuff, no one's really taught. And when I look back at my hormone journey, I think if I just had a better understanding of that from the very beginning, it would have set me up, better. But my hormone journey really starts with being put on the birth control pill at age 14. So I was in high school, I was quite young, and I had bad periods, cramping, I didn't feel good. Like most girls when they first get their period and your hormones are going crazy, a lot of people feel terrible symptoms. And, I had mentioned it to my doctor, and then they were like, okay, the birth control pill makes sense. And I kind of don't really remember having any thoughts in my head at that time. It was just like, sure, okay, great. Take this pill every single day at the same time. And then, you're off of it for that 1 week. And I was also very young for this to be happening. My body, I didn't even finish puberty. My hormones are still developing. And I know it's a controversial topic, talking all about hormonal contraception, but I think it's so important that, to recognize if you have been on a birth control pill or any sort of hormonal contraception from a young age or being a teenager, early 20s, and then you're on it for 10, 15, 20 years, your body is going to change in relation to that. And when I, started on the pill, I think I felt fine because I also didn't really have any idea what my body was going through. And then when I was in my mid-20s, I wanted to switch from the birth control pill to an IUD, and I did that, and then that gave me an extreme amount of hormonal ramifications. And it could have been from, switching, or it could have just been my body at the time. But just to put it in perspective, I gained 30 pounds in a span of 1.5 months. I blew up. And this was also when I was a personal trainer. So this was extremely just embarrassing to me, and I was confused. And I did have other things going on. I was hypoglycemic. So my blood sugar was extremely imbalanced. I was really, really hungry all the time, but I only wanted carbs and sugar. I also would have headaches all the time and just kind of uncontrollable eating patterns that I think did add to the uncontrollable weight gain, but I knew part of that was just my body was super imbalanced. And when I look back, it was definitely insulin resistance, classic insulin resistance. And then, I got diagnosed with PCOS, and I was put on medications that actually didn't help my symptoms at all. And it wasn't until I went to the NTA program and really learned about inflammation, gut health, and eating properly that I really was able to get my hormonal levels back under control. I removed a lot of starches and sugars and added in more meats and healthy fats. And I think that did wonders for my body, and I felt a lot more balanced. And then somehow, during this time, I went back on the birth control pill because I had the IUD removed because I didn't like it. It also gave me cysts, a ton of cysts on my ovaries. So that gave me a lot of bloating, a lot of pain, all sorts of stuff. But so I'm back on the pill, and then a few years later, I'm like, okay, I'm done with this. I want to come off of it. I had a lot of symptoms that I'm just going to keep private, but they were definitely impacting my quality of life. And as I got older, I'm like, I shouldn't be feeling these things. I want to feel good, and I'm sacrificing a lot of this just to be on the birth control pill. So I was like, I'm done. So I come off, and then my body kind of went back into a reset mode. And then I had some symptoms of being highly imbalanced as well. And now me being me now, working with lots of people, I was like, I'm doing a lot of the things for hormonal health, and I'm still my blood work is still off. I could not figure out why this was happening. And I went to a bunch of doctors, ended up in an endocrinologist, and then I asked her for an MRI so I could get my brain looked at. And then she was like, well, like your levels aren't that weird, but okay. So then I get the MRI, and turns out I did have a benign pituitary tumor in my pituitary gland. It's called a prolactinoma. So it was slowly secreting prolactin, and that hormone was sending all my other stuff into a state of imbalance. So I was feeling those symptoms. The root cause wasn't necessarily something I was doing. I will say these brain tumors are, no one really knows why they happen, but I do think there's an underlying, stress component. Also, during this time, I was diagnosed formally with Hashimoto's, and I kind of had a feeling for a long time I had that, but, your thyroid and your hormones, they have a lot to do with each other. But having this diagnosis was kind of shocking, because I was like, even though I asked for the MRI, it was just kind of really surprising that turned out to be what it was. But if I wasn't investigating, or if I wasn't like pursuing more and more answers through my blood work or just doctors, I would have never figured this out. And I think the scary part is I could have let this go for years and years, and then it would just grow to be a size to where it would be highly problematic. And I would say my symptoms that I was having were nothing super major. I just knew that for me, they were off. But I wasn't experiencing anything really dramatic. I would say back in like a few years ago when I had PCOS and all that stuff, way more dramatic, way more severe it felt. But this just goes to show like how important hormones are, and how getting to the root cause is what's really important to figure out how to heal. And I know people are probably curious. So for me, I just have to take like a very small amount of a medication, and it helps my body secrete less prolactin, so it should shrink the tumor over time. But that doesn't mean that I go, oh, it's just a tumor. It's not like nothing else. I did actually really ramp it up, paying more attention to my thyroid health and my stress and all of those things, so I could start feeling a lot better. And I would say like in the past 2 months, I definitely noticed a lot of the stuff I had going on like over the past year really has resolved itself, and I feel quite better. And I don't think that's just from taking medication. I think it's a combination of everything. And, I've also started taking my thyroid health a lot more seriously. I think we are all aware of thyroids and stuff, but getting the autoimmune disease diagnosis really made me think a lot more about inflammation and stress and all that stuff. And I know so many women we work with have Hashimoto's or have hypothyroid. Hypothyroid, PMS, PCOS, mood issues, a lot of fatigue, all of that can be hormonal imbalances that women normalize and experience every single day. So I think we're going to get into just the basics of what can cause a hormonal imbalance, and then a few habits you can do to heal or just improve as best as you can. Because like I said, it takes a lot of work to really get to the bottom of your hormonal imbalance. And it's not just you going to the doctor and getting your blood work. It's getting someone to actually read your blood work and interpret it to you and actually care enough to really go, okay, even if all this looks normal, like why is she still feeling this way? And take the next step. And I think if I hadn't advocated hard, I would have never figured out that Hashimoto's diagnosis either. And that makes like a huge difference in quality of life.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all this. I want to just recap a few things. I'm sorry it's been a 15-year journey for you, but I bet there's a lot of women out there who feel very heard and validated hearing that. So thank you for sharing a lot of your medical history. You mentioned women's hormone health phases. I mean, we didn't even get into the fact that a lot of medications and studies aren't even done on women. Mm-hmm. It's, we could have this conversation all day, but I just want to point out for any men who are listening, who are probably not listening, that, we have no idea. Most women are also very confused, and they're out there asking questions and listening to podcasts like the men are truly clueless. So if you are a husband or a dad of a daughter, or honestly just a compassionate human being, do some homework, or at least just ask questions and listen of the people and understand what they're going through, because it's really hard, right? And I didn't understand any of that until I became a husband, until I started looking into women's hormone health with the training that I've done for nutrition. Really complicated space. So thank you for that. A couple other points just to make sure that we all understand this correctly. One, you and I have both kind of gone on the record of doctors are incredibly important. The world can't exist without them. But there's also a time and a place where maybe sometimes they overstep. They don't have formal nutrition training. They don't have time to sit with someone for more than 15, 20 minutes. It sounds like you have found the balance of lifestyle/diet change, and then when medical intervention is necessary, whether that be surgeries, medication, whatever. Is that fair to say? And there's probably some combination of both for everyone out there if they're experiencing symptoms. Is that right?
For sure. I think it takes a team of people, and I think we are holistic minded. Therefore, we're considering the entire body as a whole. And I think that is one thing that traditional Western medicine sometimes doesn't take into account is the complex system that your entire body is, and hormones impact absolutely everything. And also your hunger, your appetite, those are hormones. Like, you would be surprised how pretty much everything between how you feel, how you look, how you move, even parts of your personality, that can be based in your hormonal output. So I think it's just really important to make sure, even if it's medication in relation to diet and lifestyle, all of that is, being properly addressed. And I think the food and the lifestyle component isn't necessarily mentioned enough. And a lot of people are focused more on medications or are put on birth control to mask a lot of hormonal issues women are having, because instead of figuring out what's going on, it's just like, oh, take this one thing and it'll kind of calm it all down. And I don't think, more power to you if that's your approach. I think that's fine, but I think that still leaves a lot of women confused. And then when they want to come off of it, then what are they left with? It's just more and more years of this piling up. And it can be a lot, and it's a lot to unpack. And I think your diet is a really important place to look. And I think insulin resistance is a really good place to start as well when it comes to looking at a cause, because that's an underlying cause for a lot of women having hormonal issues is some form of insulin resistance, and that is usually caused from poor diet and poor lifestyle. So we don't just go, okay, you have this imbalance, now what? We need to know, why did that imbalance occur? What are you doing that made this happen? And I think a lot of women also struggle with that piece, which is like, yeah, maybe the way you've been living for the past 20 years is now putting you in this situation. Mm-hmm. And you didn't even know it. And that's kind of the sad part, is like, you didn't even know that this could happen, or you could end up like this. And now you feel so helpless. And a lot of hormonal imbalance or hormonal issues women deal with when they're in menopause. So they just lived most of their life. Now they're in their 50s, and now they're trying to address the stuff that they've been ignoring for a giant chunk of their life. And that can also feel really defeating, and just really upsetting for women who care about their health but just weren't given the right tools. Yep.
Yeah, I want to call out one of our clients. Of course, I won't mention her by name, but one of my roles in our coaching business with our one-to-one coaching clients is taking all of the calls early on to see what questions do they have about the program. Are we a fit for them? Are they a fit for us? And we had someone join a couple months ago who's an OBGYN, and she's amazing. And she's obviously really brilliant, clearly very successful, and a mom. And she was just like, listen, I don't know anything about nutrition. Like, for myself, but also the fact that I see women every day with all kinds of challenges, and I don't know what to tell them. And that's not to call anyone out, because an OB could run circles around both of us with their knowledge. But I think that's a really important mindset for doctors everywhere, for medical professionals everywhere, and for people everywhere, to be like, this is a really complex space as well. And we can't know everything about it, and we can't figure it out in 20 minutes, especially on a personal level. So I think that's another really important piece that you brought up. Do you want to get into some of the major topics? I will set the stage for you, Kat, and just say we're both really big on not making promises that we don't believe in. And so we're going to cover a lot today that should really help point people in the right direction. But as we've said many times already today, this is a very complicated space. It usually involves a medical professional. It usually involves blood work or other testing, depending on what you have going on. And so we're not going to solve every single problem in the next 15 minutes on a podcast. But Kat, you're still very much an expert in terms of nutrition and how it relates to hormones. So let's get into it.
Yeah, so I just want to start with a few causes, or the most common causes. And there are a lot. And that's the problem, is even like the list I have in front of me probably barely scratches the surface, because I think it's just so highly complex. But if we take everything and we're trying to categorize it into potential causes so that you listening right now can go in your head of like, oh, is that me? Yes, no. That's what I'm trying to do here. So first one we have is aging. Obviously, as you age, your hormones will change. And I would say the status of your health and your diet, lifestyle will determine how your hormones change as you age. If you are in more poor health, you may see more drastic fluctuations. If you're in better health, you might see, not too much of an issue when approaching perimenopause and menopause. And then I think the next big one is chronic stress. If you are high stress, I would say this is probably like the number one we see with our clients. And this is, the C word, cortisol, has to do with your stress levels. And I know that's kind of a buzzword right now, but if your cortisol is high, that can lead to belly fat accumulation as well as energy issues, a lot of fatigue, a lot of the stuff that I think women report as what their symptoms are that make them feel like their hormones are imbalanced have a lot to do with stress.
And cortisol is, by the way, a very fantastic, beneficial hormone in many,
Yes.
many ways. And when you wake up in the morning and you feel sick, and then 10 minutes later you have a lot of energy, like you have cortisol to thank for that. Or when you hear those stories of like moms lifting up cars in an emergency situation, like that's a real thing. Cortisol can really improve your strength and athletic performance. There's a lot going on there. Again, this is really complex, just because I know a lot, to your point, the buzzword of cortisol right now is that it's such a bad thing. And it certainly can be, but it is a hormone that's supposed to be regulated because it has, pros and cons.
Yeah. It's just when it's firing at the wrong times. And when you wake up at 2 a.m. and you're wide awake, that's your cortisol. And that's not when you want it to be firing, which poor sleep is another cause of hormonal imbalance. But sometimes it's also a symptom. But if you're lacking adequate sleep, your body is not, resting, recovering, and repairing, and that is the time your body needs in order to function best. So poor sleep definitely can be up there. Diet high in processed foods, I think that is huge. If you are not eating vitamins, minerals, nutrients that make it so your hormones can create themselves and be optimized, you will definitely feel some impacts, and that is very closely related to insulin resistance, which I think for most women is an deep underlying cause of, a lot of hormonal imbalances. And insulin resistance is kind of like a more formal term for a blood sugar dysregulation or issue there. So if you're having, strong sugar cravings, and if you can't sleep at night and you're feeling fatigued and you're not hungry but you want sugar, like all of those things can be closely related to a diet high in processed foods. Poor gut health, of course. We can never ignore the gut. I think that can be closely related. And then, like I said earlier, taking hormonal contraceptives, it doesn't matter if you're taking them for a really long time or a short amount of time. You are giving your body hormones when you're taking them, so it's going to impact you in some way. Some people feel no side effects. Some people have horrendous side effects. So what you're taking and how long can really determine the status of your hormonal health. And just mentioning this because I think this was a big struggle I had, which is if you're on the pill and you're getting your blood work, it's not even really that accurate with what your actual hormones are doing, because it's all kind of fake and it's like fed on the estrogen in the pill. So it's still really hard, and your periods aren't actual periods, they're like fake periods. So that can make things even more complicated when you're trying to understand your health, but then you're like, okay, but my body's artificially going through these processes. Thyroid, definitely a big one there. Your thyroid controls your metabolism. A lot of people talk about feeling like they gain weight due to hormonal imbalances, and that can have a big thyroid component. Environmental toxins, this is kind of a controversial topic, but I don't think, I think it's quite clear that a lot of us, our bodies are full of plastic. They are endocrine disruptors. I think to what extent, we are not sure, but I think it's pretty clear at this point that they're, whether it's the fragrances in your room spray and all that stuff, it is having an impact on people's health. And that's why cleaning supplies, clean beauty, fragrance-free stuff, that's so popular right now for a very specific reason. And most of that is because they are endocrine disruptors. That's a whole different topic, and I think it is complicated, but I think it's just good to be aware of, and do some extra research on your own if you are curious more about that topic. And then last one, which I think is really interesting, is either sedentary lifestyle or over-exercising. So it's an extreme. If you do absolutely nothing, you're more likely to have a hormonal imbalance. But if you over-exercise, you are also more likely to have one, because both are signs of stress. Both, make it hard for your body to just optimize itself. And I think the over-exercising component is rampant with like online world or influencers or people who have really low body fat, and they're the picturesque people of health, right? If someone thinks of someone who's like in the best shape ever, it's gonna be a chick who has like no body fat. Same with a guy, although it's less impactful on a guy, but no body fat, and like that is not the pinnacle of health. She's probably not getting her period. She probably has body pains and is losing her hair, but she looks great. So we all think that's what healthy is. And I think like cannot stress that your exercise, whether it's too little or too much, definitely is telling your hormones like what to do.
We see the too much a lot with our clients, especially postpartum moms who are like, I'm trying to lose the baby weight. I'm on the Peloton 5 days a week and I'm taking classes with Dana, whoever. And it's just like, actually, yeah, that's, not the best thing for you because of the elevated cortisol levels. Not to even get into the details of like strength training and all that, which we will in another podcast, but that's a really good call out as well, because a lot of people out there are doing what they think is the right work, and it could be doing more harm than good.
Yeah. And I think one thing like I love to mention to our clients who are like, I can't eat breakfast because I'm not hungry. I'm like, well, if you're not hungry, that's the problem. And you should be hungry in the morning. Maybe not starving, but you should be able to eat. And if your body isn't hungry and you can basically wake up, have coffee, work out, take care of your kids, get to work, and then it's 12, it's noon, and now you're starving because, you haven't eaten anything, and that's when you make a bad choice, like that's a hormonal thing going on. And I think a lot of people like enjoy their lack of hunger because it makes them more efficient. Like breakfast is annoying, I know. Like you want to just get out the door, you want to go do stuff, but the fact that you're not hungry until like later in the day, that's usually a sign of like cortisol is too high or adrenaline is kicking in, and ultimately like taking your kids to school and getting to work should not give you that much stress as if you were being like chased by a tiger like thousands of years ago. And that's what state we are constantly in. And also irritability. If you're constantly irritable, bad mood, like that could be a hormonal thing as well.
Let's talk about that real quick. We do have an assessment, which we can, if you message us on Instagram, we can send it to you. We'll also put it up in our school platform that we just built. But that is such a common sign that we see often. A lot of people wait, to your point, Kat, like you're pretty attuned with what's going on with your body. I think you were probably at the doctor earlier than a lot of people. Some people really wait until it's really bad. And I understand why. But that high elevated stress is a really common symptom that I see all the time in our clients, that I had myself, that I see all the time working in major cities like San Francisco and New York. And if you are sitting in traffic and you're screaming at the person in front of you, or you're getting really frustrated with your kids to put their shoes on, it's important to check yourself. And there's nothing wrong with this. It's not you're a bad person or you have a short temper, whatever. It's you shouldn't feel guilty, but you should recognize that that's not okay. And my favorite analogy is that your hormones, in particular cortisol, is kind of like a gas pedal on a car. And it gets pushed down to give you necessary boosts. So like if you're in a Peloton class and you're in the 25th minute, and like that's the cortisol chiming in to help you. But most of us have that gas pedal pushed down all day, or at least way too much throughout the day. And so you start to see those reactions. It should be a balance. So that irritability, that high stress, that could be a really early sign that people should really look out for.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Should we get into habits to improve?
Yeah, let me underscore one thing that you said about eating, not processed foods, whole foods, avoiding refined sugar. There's a kind of a running joke in the nutrition community that we're in of like, we tell people the same thing every day. It's like, eat more protein, drink more water, avoid processed foods. And it's true, but here's a really important point. If you're having trouble with hormone imbalance, there are short-term effects to eating processed food. or eating refined sugar. You have an energy crash, you feel bloated, whatever else. Yes, those enough should probably help you maybe make better choices. But if you feel like garbage every day and you think a hormonal imbalance is to blame, remember that next time you reach for that processed food instead of making a slightly healthier choice. And I know it's hard, but we have clients who are fully gluten-free now. We have clients who drink a lot less. I personally drink a lot less not because they like alcohol less or because they don't like pizza. It's because they think big picture and they say, if I fast forward this movie and I feel like garbage again because of the choices I make, that's really going to motivate me today to reach for a healthier plate or spend a little more time at the grocery store or bring my own food to the party or whatever. So remember that if you feel like garbage, that is your body telling you that what you're eating maybe isn't okay. So even if you're getting away with the hot dog at night, and you feel all right for a few minutes, but then you wake up the next morning and your hormones are out of whack, it's a reminder that you really should be making healthier choices and use that as a motivator to do the right thing over time, which we all know what it is. We just have a hard time prioritizing, and so you will feel better. We are living proof. We see it every day.
Absolutely. And I like what you touched upon, and I think taking accountability is step number one. And I have so many people say to me, well, I've gained weight and I think it's because of my hormones. And then next question is, well, why? Like, why are your hormones imbalanced? And then people think just because I got older, I didn't do anything. It's not me. It's just my age, and then I'm like, it's 100% you. Yes, you age, but that's not news. Like, we know hormones shift, but it's like, what in your lifestyle are you doing? And if you can, have the moment of being like, oh, it's kind of my fault that I'm in this position. Maybe you had no idea, you didn't have the tools, but now you can have awareness and learn the tools. So that's where you want to be, and that's a place of empowerment. I know a lot of women go their whole life feeling very much like a victim due to their hormone issues, and they feel really hopeless and lost. And I think no matter what, at the end of the day, you can do one thing. You can make one new habit to help improve your hormonal imbalance, and you don't need to have a clear diagnosis in order to do that. You can just say, I don't feel that great, and it might be this, so I'm going to do this.
Yep. You should not feel shame, but you should be self-aware. Don't look back, be mad at yourself. That doesn't help, but try to make more informed choices. And if you need to ask for help, ask for help. Be the OBGYN asking for nutrition advice. There's nothing wrong with that. Those are the people who are doing well instead of beating yourself up. But agree, don't also, only victim blame, because that's not going to get you anywhere either.
Yeah, but I heard a quote recently. I think it's my favorite thing ever, which is like, it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility. And that beautifully sums up like the entire holistic health world, I think, is like, you didn't know doing that would get you here, but now that you do, you can do something about it.
That's right.
So
habits, let's do it.
Habits. Okay, so a lot of these are, not new, but I'm going to get into more of why they do support your hormones. Number one, veggies at every single meal. Antioxidants and phytonutrients help reduce inflammation. And like when I was explaining the causes, inflammation will wreak havoc in your body. So if you can eat foods that help your body reduce inflammation, that's a really good place to start. You do eat food every single day. So following like the next 3 things I'm going to tell you will make a difference on your hormonal health. So veggies, we want one at every single meal. Vitamins, nutrients, super important. But also cruciferous vegetables, for women especially, have those every single day because they do help your body detox estrogen. So that can be a really good way to get excess estrogen out of your system. So Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, those types of foods, really good to have every single day. And then protein at every meal. Amino acids are necessary for hormone creation. So if you're not eating enough protein, your body doesn't have the raw materials it needs to create certain hormones. Protein also helps regulate blood sugar, which ties back to the insulin stuff we were talking about earlier. And if you can regulate your blood sugar, that will set you up not just for hormonal health, but like really good health in general, and weight management. I know a lot of people listening to this might either want to lose weight or maintain their weight. And I do think protein at every meal is extremely important for that. And then fats. Fats are so important for creating your like sex hormones and steroid hormones. And if you aren't eating enough fats, your body doesn't have the tools it needs to make like the really important hormones that make you feel good. And that has also a lot to do with, sexual health and things like that. But estrogen, testosterone, like you need those hormones for your body to function. So eating fats is really important. And I'm talking about like healthy fats like avocado, olive oil, nuts, seeds. Have those one type of fat at every single meal, or at least like 3 different sources per day. And if you follow that with your eating, you're going to be in a much better place.
I don't think this needs to be said, but I'm going to say it just to be safe. Eating fats does not make you fat. That was a very popular misconception in the 80s,
Yes.
which led to an incredible amount of increased sugar, additives. You cannot live without eating fats. You will die. You also have
Yes.
incredibly unhealthy hormones, so please eat fats. And
You
if you
just-
haven't done macronutrients, ask us about that. We can help you with the right balance.
You reminded me that in my first hormonal issue with the PCOS and stuff, I definitely did not eat fats. Low fat. I thought fats were terrible. I also didn't eat salt. This was when I was like, salt free everything. Don't touch sodium. No, I didn't eat any meat that had fat on it. I thought it was bad for me. And I also was like a former vegetarian. That probably creates a bunch of hormonal imbalances, but we won't go there. But I do think like I was not eating fats. So that's why it was mind blowing to me when I started doing like the holistic program, when they were like, eat fats, you need fats. And it just was such a shift. So yes, I think that's a huge one to point out. And then feeding your gut, healthy gut is going to help with like a healthy estrogen metabolism. So eat a lot of fermented foods. 1 per day is good, but if you can't do 1 per day, maybe like aim for 3 to 4 times a week. Kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, all those things are great to have. And then limiting processed foods. Can't stress how important this is, and it doesn't have to be, not eliminating, you're just limiting. The 80-20 rule, I think, does work nicely here. 80% whole nutrient-dense foods, 20% fun foods or processed foods, whatever. But you really do want to go back to that blood sugar regulation. And a lot of those processed foods that have additives, trans fats, a bunch of sugar, and all that stuff, it will disrupt your hormones if your diet is full of those foods. So I'm not saying get rid of it entirely, but just make it the 20% of your day. Exercise. I think this is massive. And a lot of our clients who I think aren't exercising but have metabolic issues or hormonal issues, I think it's extremely important for them to resistance train. We will tweak diet, but I do think getting resistance training going is really, really important. And again, not too much, but also not too little. But physical activity does help regulate insulin sensitivity big time. Same with regulating cortisol. A morning walk can do a lot for like your energy and metabolism, and all of that is tying back to your hormonal health. And then the last one that I think everyone can do is work on their sleep. Sleep is huge. Poor sleep will disrupt the natural rhythm of hormonal release. Circadian rhythm is a concept that maybe most people are aware of but don't know exactly what it is. And your circadian rhythm is just a 24-hour internal clock that helps regulate your hormone secretion. So the way you feel when you wake up and when you go to bed, that has a lot to do with your circadian rhythm. And that's like the release of hormones at the right time when it's needed, like melatonin. We're all familiar with melatonin. Well, if you have that going off at the wrong time, you're going to feel sleepy when you shouldn't. And you want melatonin to go off at the right time so you can go to bed. And even like your hunger hormones, all of that has to do with your circadian rhythm. So if you are not sleeping enough, you will have disruption in that process, and that will totally impact your hormones. I think the relationship between a poor night of sleep and having more sugar cravings is exactly what's happening here, is that your hunger hormones are just going to be firing at the wrong time, and your body craves more energy, which could make you eat poor quality food, which ties back to, the cascade of inflammation and all that. So a lot of things you can do, and I know they also sound quite similar to just our general recommendations for overall health, because they kind of are. Like, they're not, unless you have a very specific understanding of what you're high in, if it's like estrogen or DHEA, then we can target it down and be more specific, which I do with clients all the time. If we have that information, we will niche down. But for the most part, like, these habits could get you feeling much better without you needing to do any extensive blood work or anything crazy like that. But we do think getting blood work is important and highly valuable information.
That's right. We are doing a training, which I think will be over right around when this podcast comes out. But if not, we have the ability to help you with blood work. Reach out to us if you have questions. You use a word a lot, Kat, including on this podcast. Advocate for yourself. If you go to the doctor and you just say, I need some blood work, they're going to give you like 4 things. They're going to check like your A1C and your cholesterol, and then they're going to call it a day. There's a lot more that you really should be asking for, and you honestly might have trouble getting it, but we can help with that. Or we have a third-party partner that we work with called Untitled Chapter, which looks at 48 biomarkers, and a lot of those are hormones. So we can help with that. Message us if you have questions. Otherwise, I know we covered a lot today, so our recommendation, as always, is small steps make a big difference. Just pick somewhere to start. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and do all of these habits at once and completely change your diet at once, nor should you. So find where you feel like you're struggling the most. Is it the lack of fats? Is it the strength training? Is it your sleep? And focus on that for now. We have resources for all of these things. We have more episodes coming out on sleep, seasonal depression, so we can cover more of these in detail. And of course, you can message us. So you can find me on Instagram at Andrew Hayes Life, and you can find Kat at Kat Best Wellness. Kat, anything else we didn't mention today? I'm sure lots.
Yeah, there's,
we'll have to do a part 2.
It's endless, but I think you nailed it. Just pick one thing that of what I was talking about, whatever resonated with you, that probably means that's the thing to focus on. And that's really all you can do. But, let us know if you need help with blood work. I tell my clients all the time exactly what to ask for, because why would you possibly know that? And I think if you're like, ooh, I do want to do a deeper dive, but I have no idea where to start, like, reach out to us and we'll get you ramped up.
Yep, absolutely. And we will do another episode specifically on men, probably specifically on testosterone, which is responsible for so many things, just that one hormone. And it's a very common deficiency as well. And it's also very prevalent now to just go get prescribed testosterone, which I have a lot of personal opinions on. But, generally speaking, I'd say try lifestyle stuff first. So we'll get into that on another episode as well. And otherwise, reach out to us on Instagram if you need help, and we'll see you for the next one. Thanks, everybody. Stay hydrated.
Bye, guys.